recording of part 3 of the chapter 6 review. We're going to look at percentages. We learned percentages around page 62, 63, 63A and double A down in there. And we said in the marketplace of buying and selling, or in real life, there's only three things that can happen to the price of something. What is that? It can stay the same, it can increase, or it can decrease. That's the only things that can happen. If it stays the same, there's nothing to calculate. If it increases, then there's an addition problem you're dealing with. If it decreases, it's a subtraction problem that you're dealing with. If you have an addition problem, you put what you started with plus what you're gaining. That's basic arithmetic. If you have a subtraction problem, you take what you started with minus what you're losing. So your new price is equal to your old plus your gain, or your new price is equal to your old minus your loss. That's the only things that can happen in the marketplace. Now, to find a gain, it is a percentage of the original or the old. To find a loss, it's also a percentage of the original or the old. So to find a part, you take a percentage of the whole. And to find a new price, it either was an addition or a subtraction of something. Because if it stayed the same, it wasn't a new price. Okay, so here we go. We're going to try to keep this basic logic as we can here. It says a watch normally priced at $48 is marked 25% off. We recognize that as a percentage off. We could call that a percentage of decrease. Sorry about the message there. Percentage off, percentage of decrease, percentage of loss, if we want to just be basic with the gain or loss. Sales tax of 8.25% is added. This is a percentage of increase. Or a percentage of gain. What is the cost including tax? Now, this is really like two word sentences going on. You understand? We've got a loss, and so we have the concept of new is equal to old minus loss. And then we have tax, which is the concept of new is equal to old plus gain. And what we learned to do on page 183A, if we're actually in the marketplace of buying and selling where there's a discount and a sales tax rate, then instead of writing two separate new old gain loss equations, then we just worked across the page like I'm fixing to show you. We said, okay, we have the normal price, which we call the original price. We want to actually find the amount off. When we take the amount off of the original price, it gives us what we call a sale price. We're going to pay tax on the sale price, not the original, and the amount of tax we call sales tax. We're going to add the sales tax to the sale price and get the final price, tax included. So we're looking for the cost of the watch including tax, which we're calling final price. So we're going to start over here with the original price being $48. We want to find the amount off To find a part, you take the percentage times the whole. We change that percentage to a decimal by moving the decimal 2 places to the left. So to calculate amount off, we take original, multiply it by our percentage, percent times original. 0.25 is a fourth, and a fourth of 48 is 12, and so it's $12 off. Understand that? To find the sale price, we take our original price, which was $48. We take off the amount off, which leaves us with a sale price of $36. But that's not what we pay at the register. At the register, they're going to add sales tax back to that. We pay sales tax on the sale price. So this percentage is a percentage of the sale price. And to find a part like sales tax, you take its percentage times the whole. So we're going to take sale price 36 times that percent as a decimal. 8.25% as a decimal. You would move your decimal 2 places, put a 0 as a placeholder, and get 0.0825. So we have 36 times 0.0825, and we'll use the calculator to help us with that calculation. And since we're talking about money, we'll round, if necessary, to the nearest cent. So we're going to have 36 times 0.0825, enter, $2.97 for your sales tax. So we get $2.97 for our sales tax when we do the calculation. To find our final price, we're going to take our sale price of $36. We're going to add back to that the sales tax of $2.90. And so we get a final price of $38.97. That is the cost of the watch, including tax. Any questions on number 14? Okay. Number 15. Have lots of bells ringing during this Chapter 6 review recording. This is Saturday at about 12:30 in the evening. An epoxy mix calls for 3 parts epoxy to 2 parts hardener. This to that. What is that? Well, we should recognize it as a ratio, and it's giving us that information. And so if our mind goes back to ratios and proportions on page 51 for ratios, page 52 for proportions, then we realize that this is what we've called the statement ratio. It says how many drops of epoxy would need to be needed to produce 45 drops of mix. It says this to that, and so we realize that's another ratio. It has a question attached, so it must be the question ratio. And so we're going to solve using a proportion, and the way I've shown you that is to write statement. This is just for organizational purposes. Question. And I think I'll go ahead and color code that with blue and red so it's easier to keep up with. Statement and question. If we set it up as a proportion, then here's how we're trying to do that. And I'm going to go ahead and white out that line right quick so that it's not in my way as I try to solve this problem down, and that'll make things look prettier later. Do we make the proportion say what the question says or the statement? And you may say, well, why are you asking that? Well, page 55 says that a proportion, excuse me, page 52 says that a proportion is two comparisons of the same two items. A proportion is two comparisons of the same two items. It is page 55, excuse me, page 55. Two comparisons of the same two items. Well, if you look at this, the first ratio says 3 parts epoxy to 2 parts hardener. That's epoxy to hardener. That's E over H. The question is, how many drops of epoxy to 45 drops of mix? This is E over M. We can't have that. A proportion has to be two comparisons of the same two items. My question is, do we make our proportion be what the statement says, epoxy to hardener, or what the question says, epoxy to mix? And obviously the answer has to be, we have to make the proportion say what the question says, or we didn't answer the question. And since the question is epoxy to mix, that means that both of our ratios have to be epoxy to mix. That means that we have to make some adjustments in the first ratio. Now let's look at the question ratio. The question is how many drops of epoxy E would be needed to produce 45 drops of mix. So we've got that one. You can't take numbers from the blue, the question, and put them in the red, the statement. The question on the statement, the statement asks how much epoxy, and the amount of epoxy is 3 parts epoxy right there. So we put a 3. And then it says how much mix, but this 2 is not mix. That 2 is hardener. So how are we going to get mix? Well, if it's a mix, that means there's ingredients being put together. What are the ingredients? The ingredients are epoxy and hardener. That means if we add the ingredients, we get the mix. The amount of the ingredient epoxy is 3. The amount of the ingredient hardener is 2. So the amount of mix produced by those two ingredients would be 5. Everybody see how we got the 5 for the mix. So we have a proportion, and we're going to solve that proportion by cross multiplying. We'll get 135 is equal to 5 times E, which is 5E. We're going to undo multiplication by division, and we'll get E is equal to 27. So it would take 27 drops of epoxy to produce 45 drops of mix with that given ratio. Any questions on anything from chapter 6?